Hello, everyone. We're live. Testing. Okay, we'll get started as soon as we have a few people in the chat. Okay. All right. Hello. Hi. I see we've got folks starting to come on in. We'll wait a couple minutes for the audience to build up a bit before we get started. Hi, Jessica. How are you tonight? So, where are you coming in from? Hello. We have a new person. So, where is everybody tonight? I'm in Enschede in the Netherlands. New Mexico. It's New Mexico. I know there's somebody else here because I can see we've got two folks in the watching. Now we got 3, 4. Hey, Goldie, welcome back. Glad to have you back. It's going to be the same presentation, but we'll just keep doing them. Yeah, that's, well, we're, our feeling is that every person's got to have their own, they've got to do what, everybody's going to have their own opinion about when to leave. And so what your leaving plan is going to depend on what you think is going to happen. If you think this is going to happen very slowly, you may opt for something that's sort of, I will get all my ducks in a row and be slow and careful. But if you think that they're going to start rounding people up on the 21st, you probably want to get out before then. So that's actually a good point at which to start. Let me come over here and hang on. Okay, and I'll get started, and I'll be addressing, Jessica, your comment in just a bit here. So I'm Ann Ogborn. I'm the director of Trans Rescue. We're a Dutch foundation. We get trans people out of dangerous places. To date, we've gotten about 150 people out of we've gotten people out of all the countries that are marked green on this map. Our message today is that you can get out. We have a great deal of confidence that anybody who goes about this in a business-like manner can indeed get out. whatever their circumstances. Goldie, you've been thinking about the possibility of crashing a couple of days during and after the election. So that sounds like a good idea to me. If you have friends in Seattle, might be a good time to like visit them, just in case things go badly. That is part of a leave plan. So, yeah, your plan's going to be dependent on what you think's going to happen. So Goldie's looking towards a leave plan of get ready to bug out, and right around the 20th kind of see how things are going. My example, in fact, is I'm imagining a family with either a trans adult or a trans kid. They decide they're going to make a bug out bag. This, I think, should be part of every plan, is what am I going to do if things suddenly turn very ugly? And, I'm going to have a bug out bag. I'm going to have, and by the way, we have an article on packing a bug out bag and an article on assembling your documents. We have a checklist for assembling your documents for a bug out bag. And you've got a passport. If you don't have a passport, we're going to talk about getting a passport. And then you have some plan. I'm going to do that. And then our example is, folks say, well, we're going to start selling off our property. We'll sell our car and that kind of thing. But we're going to see how it's going mid-December, and we might be willing to hang around and let our child finish out the school year or the semester before we leave, and do a little bit more orderly exit if things don't look so bad. But you're going to have some plan like this, and it's going to depend on what scenarios you want to cover. Every one of those plans is going to start with a passport. USA.gov passport is where you get one. Everybody here got a passport? And if so, if you haven't gotten a passport yet, we recommend you use the Urgent Travel Service. Get like a ticket into Canada, a Airbnb reservation that you can later cancel into Canada, and then apply for the Urgent Travel Service. You'll have to travel. You'll have to go to the office. Jessica, if yours expires next year, honestly, you probably should be renewing it now before the 20th. Because God only knows what will happen after that. And renewing it means that you are going to, at least for one day, have to surrender your passport. You really want to do that before things start changing. So a lot of this, do all this stuff when you renew it. First of all, there's two forms. There's a book, which is $130, and there is a card, which is $30. You want to spend the money, and they will let you have both. Get them both. If you're out on the road, and the J.D. Vance is floating some kind of unrealistic bill around that it won't renew X passports. Passports for trans people are going to be problematic. So you don't want to be wandering around with one thing that if you lose it, you have no official government ID. So take your, so get that extra piece of ID while you can when it's only $30. certainly do not get just the card, even if you only intend to go to Canada. That's not a good place to save money. Get the extra pages. Having more pages in your passport is always good if you're going to be knocking around. Mexico. What about Mexico? It's full of American retirees, and you could go down there and figure out some sort of way to stay. Yeah. For example, could you get a job in Mexico? Especially if you speak Spanish, just getting a job there should not be a problem. And then that would allow you to stay. Another way you could stay in Mexico is that you could just go over the border, find a place to live, etc., on a visitor visa, and then return over the border every time your visitor visa is going to expire. The immigration will eventually sort of say, why are you are de facto living in Mexico? But if you go back and forth frequently, for example, they're not going to notice or care. And you can be spending 90% of your time or more in Mexico. You can, if you have some way of making a living that involves delivering a product, you can, my perennial example is making furry costumes. If you take your orders over the internet and then you ship them, you can ship them from Mexico and receive the money in a bank account in the United States, and maintain your official residence at some friend's house in the United States, and it looks to everybody like you live in the United States, but you actually live in Mexico. I will warn you, they do not make change, weirdly, at the passport office. You have to have exact check. You have to have the exact change, so take change with you. I've seen them be crazy picky about passport photos that people made themselves. So kind of bend to the inevitable and spend the $6 on the weird little Polaroid system at the drugstore to have your passport photos made. A thing you can try and get is a second passport. If you say, well, I have a need because I have visa conflicts, that's where some countries will not admit you if you have a stamp showing you were admitted to another country. So the U.S. will actually issue you 2 passports if you claim that you're anticipating visa conflicts. So, but it's a document you want to treat with tender, loving care. There are a few questions. One is, exactly how long should you go? How close to expiry should you be before you renew it? And frankly, if it's less than 3-4 years, I'd say do renew it. That's my personal opinion. But the downside is you are going to have to let go of your passport at least overnight. the upside is you get renewed. But getting an X in your passport is something you're going to have to weigh whether or not you're going to get trouble from that. And whether that's a good idea. J.D. Vance has a paper out, says he's going to, or has a proposed bill that would eliminate giving out X on a passport. It's been interpreted, I've been seeing people in the trans community saying that they're going to cancel all the passports. Canceling a passport is a pretty extreme thing. They're much more likely to just not issue them anymore or renew them. And then finally, our take is that it's more important to have a passport than to have one in your correct gender. Obviously, if you can get your paperwork finished rapidly, great. But if not, it's more important to have a passport than to have one in the right gender. The next thing you have to consider, Jessica, did I answer your question? The next thing we have to consider is going to be just, this is a big deal. We're all scared. And, it feels like the world's crashing down, and it's easier not to think about it. But we kind of need to, because we all need to take the steps to protect ourselves. One thing I'd encourage is don't treat it as disaster. Treat it as the world's a big place and I'm off on this great adventure. Somehow kind of accidentally became a world traveler years ago, and it's done nothing but enhance my life. I've spent many years living in India and living in other places in the world. And the world's full of lovely places. As Americans, we get very used to living in a big country and not going outside of it. But the world's full of great places. So you may have to work out, if you have a spouse, if you have a partner, your partner's likely to either be more ready to go and more eager to go than you, or less. And you're going to have to work that out with them. If you're similarly, you may say the same things from, for example, parents. We're hearing a lot of people saying, my parents are telling me I'm overreacting. And, well, they're not in danger, excuse me, I'm going to unplug that. Yeah, you are going to have to work out. Sometimes you're going to have to work on relationships to do this. And you're going to have to get emotionally ready and accept that. Another thing to do is just accept that it is going to hurt sometimes. You may have some things you lose in this. I've had people write to me. One person asked me, how am I going to ship my guns? No, that's not going to happen. Somebody else wrote to me about their pets, and they might take their pets, but the important thing is to survive and get out. It's important. Okay, ways to get out. One way is just what we ordinarily think of by immigration. That is, you get get a job somewhere and get a work visa. That's the normal way to get a work visa, is that you have a job offer in hand. There are other ways. DAFT is a way of starting a company without too much money. The majority of Americans who are living abroad are retirees, because $2,000 a month is not much to be living on in the U.S., but it's a fortune in much of the developing world, and so people would rather have a better quality of life living somewhere else. Rentista visas are for people who can arrange to work one place and deliver their work to another and be paid from outside their country they're living in. Citizenship, there are some practical and reasonably fast ways to become a citizen somewhere, if you are in certain circumstances. There are millions of people out there who, whether they are refugees from the Syrian war, or whether they are kids on their gap year from college, who are kind of being footloose and fancy free and traveling around, particularly in places where the living's cheap, and you can join them. And there's lots of any infrastructure to make that happen and make that financially just reasonable. If you can move near the border and live in this kind of vague state of, I don't know which side of the border I live on. Jessica, I kind of suggested that to you, that if you can, start sort of living in Mexico, you can leave your official residence in the United States. Find some trans person who will let you officially make their apartment or residence, or some cis person, and then go to Mexico, and live, and come back just whenever you get to where you can't have one more Mexican food meal. And go back and forth, and nobody will know the wiser. And then we'll talk about a few ways that don't work. That's our plan here. Okay. We can... the first way is you can get a job overseas. The people are becoming increasingly mobile, and you get a normal work visa. The usual way to do that is to get to get the job first and then apply for the work visa. There is a program for nominative skills thing for Canada, but it operates rather slowly compared to the current crisis. I'm assuming most people need to do something that happens reasonably fast. But this is actually how I came to the Netherlands, and it did happen fast. And before that, I was in India and working as an engineer, and that was reasonably fast. I had to return to the U.S. for 2 months to get a visa once I'd been hired. But I think that could have been faster. That was mostly the consultant I hired. Another possibility, if you are even too young for like Social Security, but you have some amount of savings, you might be able to retire if you drastically cut your cost of living. So if you move to Ecuador and retire, or the Philippines and retire, or the Philippines and start doing some little job that takes you, that takes up 1 day a week, you might be financially fine for the rest of your life. To get yourself to 65 and then get your Social Security and you're fine. Okay, this is a special situation, the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. The Dutch have a treaty with the U.S. that lets you come to the Netherlands, put 5,000 euros in a Dutch bank account, establish a company, and that company could be just a sole proprietorship. It's actually just a simple form. And you register at the Kamer van Koophandel, the Chamber of Commerce, and you pay a couple €100 and you've got a DAFT visa. This allows you to live in the Netherlands. You are only allowed to operate your company, but if your company is a consultancy, that can be a large variety of things that one might think of as work. Instead of doing this job, instead of writing computer documentation, I operate a service that produces documentation for computer companies. That's actually not a bad idea for a small company. You are then allowed to build the company. It is important when you set it up that you set it up in such a way that you get the 30% tax bracket instead of the 50% tax bracket, because you definitely don't want to be paying 50% tax. So that can be influenced by the kind of firm you set up. You also, in order to do this, are going to need to demonstrate that you're what's called a highly skilled worker. That means either you have a degree or that you have some years of experience in some field and can be reasonably considered an expert. I actually have no degree. I transitioned in the 80s, and they suggested it'd be more convenient if I didn't finish my college degree when I transitioned. So I have no degree, but I have a long time. Hey, Lee. Why do you need the card along with the passport? Just basically so that if you want to get a visa somewhere, you may have to turn your passport over to that country for them to put the visa in the passport, particularly if it's a long-term visa. During that time, you won't have an official ID. If you are protecting yourself as you're getting out of the country in a hostile environment or expecting a hostile environment, having the card means that you still have some form of internationally recognized ID. The card will not actually get you on an airplane flight, however, and you cannot get into any country except Canada or Mexico with it. But at least you'll be able to demonstrate that you are an American citizen and you've got this ID. By the way, Renew your driver's license if you are coming up on the end of it, and get one of those international driver's licenses from the AAA. Just any additional ID. We have a blog post, documents to go in your bug out bag. The more of those that you can get, the better. I wouldn't recommend to anybody that they stay in the U.S. trying to get more documents, but if you can get additional documents in your hand, that may be the difference between winning and losing in some situation. For example, I over the years have had a couple of different sort of official copies of my birth certificate, but I never thought to get one, and now Kansas won't give me my own birth certificate because it's been changed, and you can't change birth certificate in Kansas. Would her learner's permit not work? You mean a driving learner's permit? That's probably of very little use. The other thing about the card is that what if your passport's stolen? So, all right. But I wouldn't get too hung up on collecting documents. Is a great thing to do. Don't let it interfere with actually getting something done. Okay, next way is being a rentista. This is also called a digital nomad or a remote worker. The idea is that you can move to a country. Sometimes there's a time limit of like 5 years. You move to the country, you are allowed to do pretty much anything a permanent resident can do. You can rent an apartment, have electricity in your name, etc. But you're only allowed to work for a company outside the country you're living in. So let's say you're living in Ecuador. If you're a graphic artist and you are doing your work, you're getting your work from France or the United States, you're in good shape. You can be there. There are a couple of catches. One is that there's often a requirement to demonstrate that for the last year you've been getting a certain amount of your income from remote sources, and sometimes they're kind of bureaucratic about how that is. For one thing, they often ask for a rather large amount. 24,000 is, I think, what it is for Ecuador, for example. And the other is that sometimes they ask that this be from a constant source, like a pension or ongoing contract. And that's rarely how people with those kind of gig jobs, if you're a sound editor, 1 month you make a whole bunch of money because you were editing some short film, and then the next month you've got nothing to do, and you spend the time marketing. So those are the downsides of these rentista visas, but they're often they're a way to get out, particularly if you can demonstrate income over the last year from some kind of contracting type work in the United States. You can often say that's remote work. Leigh, did I answer your question about the learner's permit? Did you mean a driving permit? I think you're better off with an actual driver's license because it's widely accepted as a ID. Okay. All right. The next thing you can do, anybody got questions about Rentista? The next thing you can do is that you can get citizenship somewhere, and surprisingly, this is practical. There's 3 ways to do it. First way is, are you descended? We're a nation of immigrants, and if you are descended from if you have a parent or a grandparent who is a citizen of someplace else, it's quite possible that you will be able to get citizenship in that place, which of course means you can live there. Sometimes that can go on back 3 or 4 generations for some countries. We have an expert on our staff who is an expert in helping to get that. If you are descended from somebody, we're going to be having a special session that'll be divided between all of these ways that are on this slide, particularly citizenship. French Canadian, your great grandma. It may be grandparents for Canada, but you should drop a note. You should drop us an email and request a citizenship consult. We can set you up with our expert on that field. It's too complex for me to know it. Okay, the next way is almost every countries basically want money to come in. And if you can invest in their country, they're happy to give you citizenship. Now, for many countries, this is on the order of $250,000. But that's not an unusual amount for somebody to have if they own a home in the United States. So if you can, and in some places, this amounts as little as $50,000. Those tend to be places where you might not get as much sort of traction. The lowest country is actually $18,000, Pakistan. But there's a lot of places where it's fairly inexpensive to get yourself citizenship by investment. Finally, it does not affect your. Do you mean Social Security retirement? No, it does not affect your Social Security retirement. I'm caught in the problem that I am here on a DAFT visa, and as a result, I am now 65. I could collect Social Security, but the problem is that the Social Security Administration claims I'm working because I have a company. My company, on the other hand, is what's keeping my visa alive. So I have to make some hard choices there. If you become a citizen of another country, no, it won't affect your retirement. It might affect your disability payments. So if you frankly, if you become a citizen of any country in which it's a realistic scenario that you're becoming a citizen of, that is, you're not moving to Pakistan, then that probably comes with the government health care. My I'm an old lady who's had a heart attack. I had a heart attack almost exactly a year ago. It cost me the grand total of 35 euros to have a heart attack here. I have the expensive old lady insurance, and I pay 124 euros a month for my insurance. I'm required. Everyone in the Netherlands is required to have insurance. My pharmacy does not have. At least I didn't think they had a cash register. I finally ended up having to get something that I had to pay for, but I never realized they actually had a way to take cash. They usually just hand you the medicine. So, and then the one on the right is the obvious one. I would say if you are getting married, in order to get sort of spousal sponsorship, don't enter into a sham marriage. The immigration folks have had many decades at this point of knowing how to detect those, and you're unlikely to get away with it. And it may make you in worse shape than you started. Okay. Jessica, did I answer your question correctly? Okay, so the next option is to become a hippie. Almost literally. The world is full of people who are just kind of knocking around. They may spend time and like, oh, I'm going to spend time in Nepal. I'll go trekking in Nepal, and then I'll go to India, and I will stay in some ashram for a while, and many times people are volunteering. There are lots of volunteer opportunities around. There are lots of sites that will sell you volunteer opportunities. Stay away from those. Those are intended for college students on a gap year, and they're usually expensive for a fairly short time, and it's kind of silly. On the other hand, there are programs where you can sign up for the program, sign up for a platform, and then may reach out to various people who are willing to host you to do some volunteer work in return for food and board. WWOOF, Willing Workers on Organic Farms, is an international program where you visit an organic farm, you learn about sustainable agriculture, and oftentimes ecology things, and while you're there, your food and your room are paid for. So this can be a good way to knock around the world, particularly if you have a little nest egg. You know, if you have $3,000 or $4,000 when you start, you can be on the road a long time. Especially if you can find a good reason why hippies wear tie-dye is that it's an easy business just set up somewhere, and they were buying them from other hippies. But that tune in, turn on, drop out. The turn on I don't recommend at this juncture. I don't think drugs are going to be a great addition to the mix, but definitely tune in and drop out. Workaway.info. Workaway.info is much like woofing, um, except it's a little more focused on volunteering for things. I know somebody who's doing this, helping some NGO in developing world uh, develop their social media presence and getting fed and living basically in the NGO's headquarters, and there's a lot of opportunities like that around. Teaching English, teaching children. I did one like that myself. I taught science to kids. So the Workaway is $60 for your membership. The woofing is kind of divided up by country, so you have to. Sometimes you can end up having to get a membership for every country you're in. However, wwoof.net is the center of that. And there's a lot of just small schools and things that would love to have you as a volunteer. When I was a volunteer at school, I lived in the boys' dorm because I was the dorm monitor. Yeah, what if you're... yes, there is a way to check. The more you can track down, and honestly, the like, how friendly are you with your parents? Many of us are not. But if you can ask your grandparents things like, where was your dad born? That makes the life a lot easier. Because sometimes this can kind of become a detective thing. Fortunately, like I say, we've got somebody who's basically it's his hobby is tracking this stuff down. It's kind of an amazing hobby. But yeah, we definitely we can help you track that stuff down. Okay. Sure. Well, get your grandma to tell you as much as she can about her parents. Like, get their names and when they were born and where they were born and the name of their church and that kind of thing. And yeah, if you can find their baptismal records, people didn't move around that much back then. So the church might still have their baptismal records. And that would be a place you could start hunting. You can also start hunting on sites like genealogy.org and I've forgotten, ancestry.com. But yeah, we can hook you up with Will, and Will might be useful. Okay. All right. Our next method is you don't have to reside in the place that you live. Where you physically are and where the government thinks your paperwork is can be two different places. I lived for years out of an RV. So my RV was in a different place every night, but the government thought I lived in one of those private P.O. box places in Fremont, California. And they were happy to send me all my, official paperwork there. That was my home. And then so what you can do here is you can officially reside in San Diego, but actually live in Mexico on a tourist visa, because the Mexicans are perfectly happy to let you in for, memory served me right, it's 6 months. But more realistically, what you want to do is go back and forth often enough that it doesn't look like you're just going out for 6 months, coming back just to touch your toe in the U.S. and then leaving again, because they'll begin to say, hey, you're actually living here, you need a residence permit. But, people in San Diego meet people in Tijuana all the time and go over that border. And you can not really be living, you can not really be anywhere close to where you are, or to where your official residence is, especially if you have a job that lets you kind of deliver work occasionally. Then that for example, if you work in the film industry, you can live in Mexico, and then when they're filming, if you work in the film industry, you work very hard, and then there's like weeks of downtime before the next gig. So move to Mexico and return for the next filming gig, and and then start thinking about how to make your life a little more expansive than that. Can you ask if the process for spousal sponsorship can be done entirely in Canada? I believe it can. I don't believe you have to return to the United States to do it. One thing to remember is that many of these rules are quite old. And, back in the 1800s, that would have been a considerable burden. I believe you can. We are having a special section on Canada, and that's a good question for that special session. Simon Naganga, our attorney, will be presenting that, and he's rapidly immersing himself in Canadian immigration law, and I'm certain he'll be up to speed on that. So, another way to be physically present someplace, or to be physically present in a different place than where you live, is to get a job in the marine industry. Get a job on a cruise ship. Get a job as a sailor on an oil tanker. And that will take you all over the world. Become a flight attendant. That's a job that's, there's a constant demand for, actually. So those are some options. Questions about border life? Yeah, I would say my best answer for spousal sponsorship should probably be, you guys should show up definitely for the Canada presentation. Okay. Now I want to talk about a few ways that don't work. First is asylum. In order to claim asylum, you must demonstrate that you would suffer one of death, torture, serious bodily harm, lengthy imprisonment or lengthy unjust imprisonment or conditions intolerable to life. And that actually is not going to work for trans people fleeing the United States at this time. If conditions get worse, we may be in better shape. Although, frankly, I expect there to be considerable lag between when we need asylum and when we actually can get it. Even if you could get asylum, and it is a tempting thing because it feels a bit like justice to be able to say, yeah, these people are taking me in because you treated me bad. It's a hard life. Being an asylum seeker is a very tough life, and I would suggest to you, you have one of the most powerful passports on earth. You can find better ways to keep yourself outside the United States than applying for asylum. If you are being forced back to the United States and it does, and conditions have become immediately hazardous, or you believe you'll be arrested when you return, then don't hesitate to apply for asylum. But otherwise, we're kind of asking people not to apply for asylum also because we want to make certain that the first people who apply for asylum are people, are sort of carefully polished test cases that would be very embarrassing to turn down and that are very good cases, have very great documentation, etc. Not just whoever happens to do it first. Second is you can overstay, but and in many places the parent cost of doing that is pretty low, and you may have to make a decision whether to be gay and do crime because you're already an outlaw, or whether that's going to be counterproductive. The fact is that sooner or later someone is going to ask you for your paperwork, and then you're going to be caught out. If it shows in your passport that you've been deported, your ability to move around the world is now permanently reduced. So if you think you're in that going to be in that situation, if your visa's expiring, or and you think you're going to be picked up, get out. Don't wait to be picked up, because you'll be better off. If you and then you don't want to be deported for many reasons. And finally, I would caution you, we're all trying to be a community and help each other, but be careful. If you help someone who is a minor, even if they're 17, if you help them to move to another country, and helping them could be as little as sending them some money, you are guilty of child trafficking. Even if they were willingly going along with it, and even if you're getting them away from their abusive, crazy religious right parents. So don't do it. That's a very, very dangerous game to play. Okay, some issues that'll come up along the way. You're going to have to deal with what kind of commitments you've got in your life. Are you taking care of your parents? Are you taking care of, are you a lead researcher on a research project? Are you really excited about the fact that you've built up the local orchestra? You're going to have to cope with all those things. Similarly with possessions, there are things you're probably going to have to give up. when I emigrated from the United States, I was operating an engineering works. So I had like 20 tons of industrial metalworking machinery. And when I left the United States, I left with one carry-on, one checked bag. If you are on disability, it is definitely going to... you can export your SSDI. There are some conditions on that. SSI, you cannot export. We're going to be having a special session on disability, but it definitely is going to complicate getting out. And finally, while it is possible to get out with very little money, a sign on the side of a highway for 3 days will definitely get you $160. That's enough to get a passport. Once you have a passport, hitchhike to the San Ysidro crossing and walk across into Mexico. That is a way of getting out, spending, starting from absolutely no money. Hey, see ya, Goldie. So it is possible to get out without money, but the more money you got, the better situated I think you're going to be afterwards. So, but that's sadly the reality of the world. Okay. Comments? Questions? I got a little present for you, since you sat through me blathering. I'm giving out the super secret email, and we try and get to these questions first. Since we want to get people informed, and we'd rather they came to these rather than just asking us questions that we already know. Or questions that we know we're going to answer in this presentation. So, but if you have questions, if you got questions about your specific situation, if there was something I didn't know, this very much is a matter of learning on both sides. I have learned a tremendous amount in the last few days as we've had increased activity. I hadn't even thought about the card. I knew about the card, but I hadn't even thought about its utility till this started. And somebody pointed it out to me. But if you have questions, if you send us an email, we will try to get you an authoritative answer. Okay? And we do try to be careful that what information we do send out comes from pretty reliable sources. I will caution you, there's a fair amount of misinformation in this area, more so than many other fields. For some reason, it's a thing lots of people are publish not very well researched information about. Okay, any more questions? If not, I'm going to be wrapping up. Okay, I think that's it. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, sorry to ask again, but the question my partner asked before, you didn't hear an answer. I'm not certain which question you're... could you ask the question again? I'll answer it. You've asked a number of questions. I'm not certain which question you meant. If my answer is I'm not entirely sure, and I feel like I'm going out on a limb here, but I believe it certainly can. If you want an authoritative answer, come to the session on Canada that we're having. Let me look it up. And in fact, I will make certain that our lawyer is prepped with that question, because he's actually the one. Let's see here. When is the Canada session? Canada. November 17. On November 17, we're having a session. That's this coming weekend, I think. And I will make certain that Simon knows you're going to be asked that question. But my understanding is that, yes, it can all be done in Canada. Canada probably has something on their website about getting married in Canada. But I'll also, and you can email us at USA Questions with that question, and I'll make certain you get an authoritative answer. Okay? Okay, folks, if there's nothing else, I will go ahead and start signing off here. Lee, like you say something, I'll know that you got your answer for the moment, and then I'll sign off. Okay, I think I've... all right, I think we're at the end. Bye, folks. I'm going to terminate the stream. Bye-bye. Oh, man.